Today, a video on framing and fur, aka wool, aka insulation. I know it was a stretch, but I needed to keep the alliterations going. Framing, fur, sounds better than framing and insulation. Worth it. First, framing. I've said this before, I'm obviously saying it again. There are so many ways to build out a van, and none of them are right or wrong. I say that, but there probably are some wrong ways to do things. But for the point of this video, there's no right or wrong way. We're all winners here. Here's what we did. We used 1x2 furring strips and hex zinc plated washer head self-tapping drill point screws. Sometimes the descriptions on things are too much. Metal screws, they were metal screws. Again, these are supposed to be self-tapping, but I still like to drill pilot holes with my metal drill bits. Beware though, not all metal in the van is created equal. I broke many a bits because of some double layered supports. In those situations, I actually was able to use this Sikaflex, which I've talked about in previous videos. The glue that saved my life. Again, I hope this video is helpful, but everyone frames their van out so differently, and that's normally specifically for what they want in their van. For instance, you can see right here, I started framing the ceiling differently than normal because I knew I was gonna be having overhead cabinets. I used my Craig joiner. This just gave it extra support, not only from the wall, but also from the ceiling. Another area I obviously decided to frame out differently was this inset wall cabinet. You'll at times feel like you're wasting space because the ribs that make up the van protrude out so far. Therefore, I put a cabinet in. The upside to that is it creates a lot of good space for insulation. You wouldn't know this, but this is about 0.001% of all the footage I have of framing in our windows. Framing in our windows was like right at the bottom of least enjoyable things in building the van. I don't know if that's how I did them. I don't know if it's just my personal preference, but if I had to take a guess, it's because the Ford Transit, and don't get me wrong, love the Ford Transit. Ford Transit for the win. Ford till I die. Freaking love Ford, but there's not one 90-degree angle in this van. That made things like framing in the windows not fun at all. But you figure it out. Once you finish your framing and obviously insulation, which we'll get to, you get to put up your walls, which is highly satisfying. It really goes from a construction site to feeling like a little home, or like maybe a tree fort. Let's go with that. You'll see this vary, but some people will use glue and nails to put up their walls. I use screws, which wasn't always fun because you had to inset them so you could wood filler over top them to make sure it was a smooth surface. But I knew our home is on wheels, which means there'd be a lot of vibration. So screws seemed like the right choice. The last bigger piece of framing we did was our partition wall. Again, every van differs, but we decided to put in a partial partition wall behind our driver's seat. The frame obviously was for the structure, and then we had to cut out plywood for the front and the back to butt up closely to the walls. I used 1x1s for this to make sure that there was enough room for insulation and an outlet. All right, again, I fast forwarded through a lot of our footage, but I think you get the idea of how framing worked for our van. After the fact, knowing what I know, what would I do differently, what would I keep the same? Something I would keep the same is the thickness of the furring strips and plywood we used. You see some people use a simple 1/4-inch piece of plywood, but then when mounting anything to that plywood, you have to make sure that you hit one of your furring strips or studs. Whereas because my plywood was thicker, I was able to screw directly into it, gaining immediate structural integrity. Something I would do differently, and I don't technically have a solution for this, but wood filler is more used for good woodworking projects, not necessarily the most flexible or moldable substance. What I'm getting at is we patched a lot of holes and cracks and then started driving and things began to split. My time since then laying in bed thinking about what I would have used, maybe some high intensity silicone, possibly Bondo, but again, just try to keep your cracks between plywood as small as possible. All right, insulation. You could spend hours, days, months, years, light years. You could spend light years researching insulation. That was ridiculous. You could spend a long time researching insulation for camper vans. You get the point. I mean, we're talking sprayed in, laid in, rolled on, stick on, Finsulate, fiberglass, mineral wood, foam board, blah, 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 blah. I'm gonna tell you what we went with, and that was one of the wool substance. That's right, we went with Havelock wool for our insulation. If you've done any bit of research already, I'm sure this has came up. First things first, this stuff is organic. And I said it like that because it smells like a barn, but not in like the ew, what did I just step in kind of barn, but like the freshly cut hay and baby ducklings kind of barn. Havelock wool is renewable, sustainable, biodegradable, compostable, but really what I love about it, it has a really good management of moisture, it has a high R value, and it's very, very sound dampening. And I think this goes without saying, but you're not cramming your small living quarters with fiberglass and nasty chemicals. A huge win as well is right on their website, they show you exactly how much you'll need for your van. So the time lapse is not rocket science. You take the insulation and cram it in every tiny little crack and crevice in your van. One more tip that you didn't see here is you can use some spray adhesive, or we even use some Reflectix tape to keep the insulation up if you have problems with it continuing to fall down. Knowing what I know about insulation, I would absolutely keep Havelock wool. I haven't tried all the other insulations, but for the price point and for the peace of mind you're not laying in a bed of chemicals, it's fantastic. Only thing I would do differently is ahead of time, I'd probably get some type of ramrod. Yeah, let's go with that. I get a ramrod to shove the wool in the small areas of the van. So there you go. Your light years of research is over. Havelock wool. Stuff works great. All right, framing and insulation are checked off the list. You've done them, you've completed them. The project looks beautiful. Well done. Bravo. Congratulations. On to what's next. What is next? Something's next. If you want more of what's next, you have to make sure to just subscribe. Just do the subscribe thing. Just don't make it weird. You're making it weird. I hope your van build is coming along swimmingly. Ask any questions you might have in the comments and I'll make sure to try to get to you. And that's all I got.